If you've seen the first video in this series, you already know how Ripple quietly built its foundation between 2019 and 2021. If you haven't yet, it's worth checking out. That episode dives into how small engineering teams in Iceland, London, and Asia built the early framework that made RippleNet possible. Here's the short version. Those early years were about plumbing and pathways, acquiring Algrim, Logos, Strata Labs, and taking a major stake in Tranglo. That work gave Ripple control over liquidity and corridor access. That's exactly what 2023 was about. The year Ripple shifted from being a payments company to becoming a true institutional custodian. And the pivot started with one acquisition most people missed, Medico. By early 2023, crypto markets were still shaking off the chaos of 2022. Big names had collapsed, trust was at an all-time low, and every serious financial player was asking the same question: who can we trust to safeguard digital assets? Ripple saw that moment coming years ahead. It already had the rails for moving money instantly, but now it needed the safes, the infrastructure to store and manage assets securely under regulated conditions. That's why in May 2023, Ripple spent roughly $250 million to acquire Medico, a Swiss company already working with some of the biggest names in global banking. Medico wasn't a startup chasing hype. It was built from day one for compliance and institutional trust. Its flagship platform, Harmonize, let banks hold, issue, and manage digital assets without giving up control of their private keys. In other words, it was built for the same kind of risk-averse clients Ripple had been courting for years. Now think of Ripple's business like a global highway system. The XRP ledger and RippleNet are the roads. Liquidity Hub is the traffic control. And Metaco? It became the vault and control tower all in one, managing what enters and exits the network safely. With Metaco, Ripple suddenly had the technology stack to compete directly with the likes of Fireblocks, Anchorage, and even custodians tied to major banks. But Ripple wasn't just copying them, it was combining custody with instant settlement, something the others couldn't do. That combination mattered because the future of finance isn't just about holding assets, it's about putting those assets to work in real time. Medico was already trusted by Citi, BBVA, and BNP Paribas. By buying it, Ripple didn't just get new software, it got credibility. The kind of credibility that opens doors in boardrooms where blockchain used to be a dirty word. And let's not forget the timing. In 2023, Ripple was still facing U.S. regulatory pressure. Owning a Swiss-regulated custody platform gave it breathing room, a European anchor that operated under strict financial oversight. While U.S. firms were fighting to stay alive, Ripple was expanding quietly into one of the world's safest regulatory zones. That was a big signal to institutions. It said Ripple was building for the long haul, not chasing headlines. But Ripple being Ripple, it wasn't done yet. Just a few months later, in September 2023, it announced another deal, this time in the United States, to acquire Fortress Trust, a Nevada-chartered trust company with the licenses needed to provide custody and settlement to American clients. At first, it looked like a perfect follow-up. Medico gave Ripple the technology, and Fortress Trust could have given it the U.S. licensing footprint to match. If the deal had closed, Ripple would have gained direct access to multiple state trust charters, allowing it to custody assets and move money across borders inside U.S. jurisdiction. But right after the announcement, Fortress revealed that one of its vendors had suffered a security breach. Ripple took a hard look, paused the acquisition, and decided not to go through with it. Instead, it kept a minority investment and moved on. Some people called that a failed deal, but in reality, it showed discipline. Ripple wasn't buying licenses at any cost. It was protecting the integrity of what it was building. In traditional finance, pulling back from a risky acquisition isn't a loss. It's a sign of maturity. By the end of 2023, Ripple had exactly what it needed anyway. Metaco was fully integrated into its product ecosystem, and that opened doors far beyond payments. For banks, it meant Ripple could now offer custody, tokenization, and liquidity under one roof. For asset managers, it meant they could store tokenized securities or stablecoins using the same infrastructure that powers global settlement. And for Ripple itself, it meant control, complete control over the flow of value from creation to storage to movement. Meanwhile, the XRP ledger was evolving in parallel. New features like clawback and oracles gave it compliance and pricing tools tailored for tokenized assets. Metaco's secure custody became the off-chain counterpart to those on-chain advancements. Together they formed a bridge between regulated finance and open blockchain systems. That bridge is where Ripple thrives. It has always played in the overlap between traditional finance and digital innovation. In 2023, that overlap became tangible. Medico gave Ripple the hardware of trust. Fortress Trust gave it the lesson of caution. And together, they positioned Ripple to operate globally with the same standards big banks demand. It also changed how Ripple organized internally. Custody went from being a side feature to one of its main pillars, sitting alongside payments, treasury, and liquidity. That's when the company's focus shifted from moving value faster to managing value safely. And it made Ripple's product ecosystem far more cohesive. Liquidity Hub, which helps companies source crypto and fiat liquidity, now tied directly into a secure custody layer. A business could move funds, store them, and settle instantly, all inside Ripple's infrastructure. You can think of it like upgrading from a road system to a full financial city. Ripple had the streets and highways, now it had the banks, the vaults, and the control centers. That's why this year was so important. When regulators tightened the screws across the industry, Ripple was already ahead. While exchanges were scrambling to prove they held customer funds, Ripple was working with audited custody and institutional compliance baked into its design. It's easy to miss how deliberate this was. From the outside, it might look like Ripple stumbled into a custody business. But if you zoom out, the pattern is clear. Every acquisition since 2019 stacked on top of the last. First the pipes, then the corridors, and finally the vaults. By 2023, the system was complete enough to serve the next generation of financial products, stablecoins, tokenized treasuries, and corporate assets that live on-chain. Ripple wasn't chasing the retail market. It was building the infrastructure that institutions would eventually rely on, even if they didn't realize it yet. And the market noticed. For the first time, Ripple was being mentioned not just in the context of payments or XRP, but in discussions about custody and compliance alongside traditional custodians. That's a major shift in perception. It's also proof that Ripple's strategy worked. While much of crypto spent 2023 dealing with fallout and lawsuits, Ripple was spending that time building the foundation for regulated digital finance. It had transformed from a company that enabled payments to one that enabled confidence. That's the difference between surviving and leading. So when people ask when Ripple became more than a payments company, the answer isn't vague anymore. It happened in 2023, the year it bought Metaco, learned from Fortress, and officially entered the custody race. Everything that comes next, stablecoins, treasuries, institutional liquidity, will rest on what Ripple built this year. The next videos in this series will show where that foundation leads, but this chapter stands on its own as the moment Ripple became bank grade. It's no longer just the company building faster payments, it's the company building the system those payments run on. This channel is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research and keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, or sharing it with a friend.